Hey guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and today I'd like to share a fun read aloud with you of the story Mr. Angelo. Mr. Angelo was written in 1960 by Marjory Schwalje, and the illustrations are by Abner Graboff. And I hope you really enjoy this story about a kind-hearted man who wants to start his own restaurant. If you're ready to get started, I'm ready to start reading too. Mr. Angelo. So you can see that he likes to cook. He has lots of cooking gadgets. Here's Mr. Angelo himself with his cool mustache. And this is Mr. Angelo's house. Mr. Angelo lived in a big red house at the top of Butternut Hill. He liked to keep house for himself. He liked to sweep and he liked to wash windows. He liked to sit on the front porch and watch the cars go by. He liked to putter about in his garden too. But most of all, Mr. Angelo loved to cook. How many of you guys like to cook? I know when I was a kid, I liked to help. I wasn't good at cooking by myself, but I liked to help. Every morning, as soon as he was dressed, Mr. Angelo went out to his kitchen. He patted his tummy. Then he said to himself, "Now what do I feel like cooking today?" And whatever he felt like cooking, he cooked. Sometimes he made an enormous batch of chocolate fudge with nuts on top. Sometimes he made a gigantic pot of frankfurters and sauerkraut. Sometimes he made a tremendous pancake with strawberry jam in the middle. I've never had a pancake with strawberry in the middle, just on top. Mr. Angelo cooked just once a day, and he ate whatever he cooked. He ate it for breakfast, for lunch, and for supper. He liked it that way. Mr. Angelo loved to eat too, but he made such large potfuls of things. He just couldn't eat everything up. Besides, he was getting terribly fat from so much eating. He had to squeeze to fit into the wicker chairs on his front porch. So, Mr. Angelo loves to cook, and he loves to eat. But he makes too much food, and he has to eat it all himself. And he doesn't like it. It's bad for his belly. One morning, Mr. Angelo was cooking a huge pot of corn on the cob. Suddenly he said to himself, "This is ridiculous! I can't possibly eat all of this corn. As a matter of fact, I have food left over from yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. What shall I do?" Mr. Angelo wondered. He stood there thinking and pondering. All at once, he rapped the stove with his wooden spoon. He jumped up in the air and clicked his heels together. The water in the pot bubbled over and got the stove all wet. But Mr. Angelo didn't care. He had an idea. "Why, I have it!" he exclaimed. "I know what I can do. I can sell some of this food. People would come here and eat. That would solve all my problems. I wouldn't have any food left over. I wouldn't get any fatter, and I'd make plenty of money besides." So you think this is a good idea? You think Mr. Angelo is going to make lots and lots of money? We shall see. Mr. Angelo went out to the tool shed in his backyard. He found a clean board and some black paint. He made a very large sign which said, "Mr. Angelo's Eatery." He nailed the sign to the front porch so people going by would be sure to see it. "Ah, there," said Mr. Angelo to himself. "Now all my troubles are over." The next morning, Mr. Angelo got out of bed very early. I'll have to start cooking at once, he said. Folks will see my sign. They'll come running to my eatery. I must get busy. He dressed and went out to the kitchen. Now what do I feel like cooking today? He asked himself. It happened that he felt like cooking angel food cake. He got out flour and sugar and salt and eggs. He got out his largest mixing bowl and all of the cake pans he could find. He whipped up enough batter for 16 angel food cakes. The cakes were golden brown and beautiful. While they were cooling, Mr. Angelo went out to the front steps to wait for customers. So you can see all of his angel food cakes. Is there really 16, you think? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They're all there, just cooling and waiting for customers. Very soon, 3 carloads of people stopped at the eatery. They went into the house. They sat down at Mr. Angelo's dining room table. Mr. Angelo wrapped a white towel about his waist. He smiled at all the people. I'm ever so glad to see you, he said. I'm serving cakes this morning. Oh, good, said a tall lady in a green hat. I'll have hot cakes and sausages. Wonderful, said the big man with a very long beard. I'll have griddle cakes and eggs. Yummy, said a boy named Jim. I want pancakes and maple syrup. So all of these people are happy that it's cakes, but they don't know that it's all angel food cakes. Mr. Angelo frowned. Oh no, he said. I don't mean hot cakes or griddle cakes or pancakes. I mean angel food cakes. I felt like making angel food cakes today. Angel food cakes, the people shouted. Why, it's breakfast time, said the boy named Jim. You don't eat angel food cake for breakfast. I do, Mr. Angelo said. I make whatever I feel like cooking and then I eat it all day long. The big man with the long beard groaned. That may be all right for you, he said, but you can't run a business that way. When you have an eatery, you have to cook what the customers want. So this man is really mad. Jim has maybe never had cake for breakfast before. Have any of you had cake for breakfast before? Sometimes it's okay. Mr. Angelo felt very sad. I'm sorry, he said, but that's the way things are. I like to cook what I feel like cooking. Today I felt like cooking angel food cakes. The people got up from the table and went away. Mr. Angelo felt miserable. Don't feel sad, Mr. Angelo, said the boy named Jim. If you're going to make angel food cakes, why don't you open up a bakery? If you had a bakery, people would buy your cakes. Then Jim went away too. So it seems like Jim's kind of a nice kid. He's saying, don't feel bad. Maybe instead of calling it an eatery, you call it a bakery. And then people can come and get cake. Mr. Angelo felt happy again. That's exactly what I can do, he said to himself. I can have a bakery. Yes, a bakery is much better than an eatery. I won't have any extra dishes or tablecloths to wash. He went straight out to the porch and took down the sign. It was very easy to change the word eatery to bakery. He only had to change the eat to bake. Now it said, Mr. Angelo's Bakery. You can see how he took a little chunk and changed the eat to a bake. Mr. Angelo sat down on the steps to rest. There, he said to himself. Now all of my troubles are over. You think so? The next morning, Mr. Angelo got out of bed very early. It's still dark. You can barely see the moon. You can barely see the porch. I'll have to start cooking at once, he said. Folks will see my sign. They will come running to my eatery. I must get busy. He dressed and went to the kitchen. Now what do I feel like cooking today? He asked himself. It happened that he felt like cooking spaghetti and meatballs. He got out ground meat and spices and made 74 meatballs. He got out tomatoes and more spices and made a big pot of tomato sauce. While the sauce was bubbling and boiling on the stove, he got out the spaghetti pot. It was as big as a wash tub. He filled it with water and set it on the stove to boil. As soon as the water was hot, he made a big pot full of spaghetti. Then everything was ready. The meatballs and the sauce and the spaghetti. Now, I'm not going to count all 74 of those meatballs. I believe that they are here. You can see all of the bathtub of spaghetti, all of his 74 meatballs, his sauce in its pot. Problem solved. Mr. Angelo went out to the front porch to wait for customers. Before long, Mr. Angelo's front room was full of people. I'd like 2 loaves of rye bread, said a short lady in a long coat. I want a chocolate layer cake, said an old man with a red necktie. The boy named Jim was there too. I'll have 3 sugar buns, he said. Mr. Angelo frowned. He said, Oh, dear me, I don't have rye bread or chocolate cake or sugar buns. Today I felt like cooking spaghetti and meatballs. I'm selling spaghetti and meatballs today. So he's changed it to bakery, and now people want things that come from a bakery, like bread and cake and sticky buns. Spaghetti and meatballs! Shouted the people shouted. Jim laughed and laughed. Oh, Mr. Angelo, he said, you don't sell spaghetti in a bakery. Who ever heard of a bakery that sold spaghetti and meatballs? Mr. Angelo said, Oh, dear me, I never thought of that. I like to cook what I feel like cooking, and today I felt like cooking spaghetti. The old man with the red necktie shook his head from side to side. That may be all right for you, he said, but you can't run a business that way. When you have a bakery, you gotta cook whatever the customer wants. I guess that's true. Poor Mr. Angelo. Everyone went away. Mr. Angelo went back into the kitchen and sat down. He said to himself, I don't know what to do. I tried to have an eatery, but that didn't work. Then I tried to have a bakery, and that didn't work out either. I guess I'll have to stop cooking. Don't be sad, Mr. Angelo, said a voice. Mr. Angelo turned around. The boy named Jim was standing there. You don't have to give up cooking, said Jim. I have a wonderful idea, Mr. Angelo. Mr. Angelo shook his head. He sighed. Oh, I've tried to have an eatery. I tried to have a bakery. What else? What can I try now? So, again, Jim is being a real helpful little guy and saying, don't give up. This isn't the end. Jim sat down beside Mr. Angelo. He said, You need someone to help you, Mr. Angelo. You need a partner. I have an idea, Mr. Angelo. I have an idea for us to be partners. We can work together. Jim began to whisper in Mr. Angelo's ear. He whispered for a long time. Every now and then, Mr. Angelo nodded his head, and all at once he began to smile. Then he began to laugh. Oh, he laughed and laughed. Oh, that's a wonderful idea, Mr. Angelo said. Soon, Jim went home. I'll see you tomorrow morning, he called to Mr. Angelo. Mr. Angelo sat quietly in the kitchen and smiled to himself. Ooh, must be a really good idea. That Jim, he's a smart guy. I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder how they're going to be partners. It's nice to work together. The next day, Mr. Angelo got up earlier than ever. You can see the moon is still up high in the sky. He washed and dressed in a hurry. He went out to the kitchen. Now, what do I feel like cooking today? He said to himself. It happened that he felt like cooking apple pies. He got out apples and raisins and cinnamon. He got out butter and sugar and flour. He made pans and pans of apple pies. He popped them into the oven. When they were cooked, he set them on the table and the windowsills to cool. Just then, there was a knock on the door. It was Jim. Jim said, "Hello, Mr. Angelo. I'm all ready if you are. Are you ready, Mr. Angelo?" Mr. Angelo replied, "I'm all ready, and I'm all excited too." So you can see all of the windows and all of the tables have apple pies covering them. Yum. They packed the pies in a big basket. They covered the top with a white, clean tablecloth. They made a sign and put it on a stick. They put the sign in the basket. Then they carried the basket of pies outside. There on the sidewalk stood Jim's red wagon. It was almost new, and it was beautiful. On the side of the wagon, in big letters, were the words, "Mr. Angelo's Home Cooking." Jim and Mr. Angelo put the basket of pies in the wagon. The sign sticking up out of the basket said, "Special today, apple pie." So you can see that Mr. Angelo's house is up here and he's waving to Jim. Jim has loaded up his wagon with pies. And it says Mr. Angelo's Home Cooking, and Jim is off to sell the home cooking. "Good luck, Jim," Mr. Angelo said. "See you soon," Jim called. He went down Butternut Hill with a wagon full of pies. "Bye, Mr. Angelo's Home Cooking," he shouted to the left and the right. "Today's special is apple pie. Buy an apple pie." Mr. Angelo went back into his house. He went out to the kitchen and washed the dishes. He washed the pots and pans too, and he put everything away. Then he went out to the porch to wait for Jim. He didn't have to wait for very long. Very soon, Jim came running up Butternut Hill. He pulled the wagon behind him, and the basket was empty. Jim called, "Mr. Angelo, I sold every pie. The people wanted to buy your pies." The two partners sat down on the front steps. Jim said, "I'll bring my wagon every morning." So you can see there's Mr. Angelo. He was just waiting for Jim. But when Jim got there, he had sold out of all the pies. "You had a wonderful idea," Mr. Angelo said to Jim. "I'm glad we are partners. I will cook and you will sell. We'll share the money that we get, and every day I can cook whatever I feel like cooking. Now all my troubles are over." Mr. Angelo stood up. "Come into the house for lunch," he said to Jim. Suddenly, Mr. Angelo began to laugh. "Oh, we sold every pie," he said. "We didn't save a pie for lunch. I'll have to cook something for lunch. And now I don't even feel like cooking." "But I feel like eating," said Jim. "I feel like eating peanut butter sandwiches and strawberries and milk." And that's what they had for lunch. Peanut butter sandwiches with strawberries and milk. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story of Mr. Angelo and Jim. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you are already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really does mean a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, click the subscribe button down here at the bottom of the page. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. I hope to see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.